Hello and welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. Today, my guest is 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏. Jared is one of my best friends and one of my oldest friends. Jared and I have actually been through a lot together, and we've seen each other in various different stages of life. We actually met in university. At the time, we were both studying finance. At the time, we were also drinking a lot, and that was kind of our core of our university experience, is studying and drinking a lot. And those were the early bonding experiences, though, where we really became best friends. We were roommates, and we did everything together. Eventually graduating from university, and we got into entrepreneurship together. We got into plant medicines together. We went on our first backpacking trip together, and today we actually even have similar offerings with the style of coaching and business coaching. And Jared is still one of my closest friends today. Jared's journey is really interesting. He's actually also the one who got me into personal development in the early years, but Jared has kind of gone through the early stages of success. And, you know, a lot of people resonate with the idea of like capturing or feeling like you've attained to success, but then internally not feeling that. And a lot of Jared's work emphasizes the inner work required to actually experience the success that you want to feel in life. And Jared takes us through, in this podcast, kind of his journey with finding success and going through struggle in his own inner world, dealing with debt, and eventually coming out the other side of it. And today, Jared has a really powerful offering and perspective on these things that he helps others with, because he's really been in the dark side of it all. And Jared kind of guides us through that whole process and into what he does today. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, my friend Jared.
Hello, Brad.
Welcome to the Spiritual Wealth Podcast. I'm excited to have you on. I actually came on your podcast like a year ago, and I don't think you ever aired that one.
Not yet. Let's not talk about that.
Okay, we'll skip that part.
A lot's happened since then.
You've been my best friend, I think, for the longest period of my life. And we met in university, and I'd say I've gone through more different stages of my journey with you than anyone else. Like, you've seen me in the most amount of phases. Back in university, we met grade? Or not grade.
Well, for me, it was my second year.
Yeah. That was in my first year, I guess. Oh, no, it was my second year, but first year at UNBC.
Yeah.
And back then, we were both studying finance and drinking a lot of alcohol.
A lot of alcohol, yeah.
Yeah, a lot too much alcohol.
Yeah.
But that was kind of that was our first stage, is just partying.
So we were initially connected.
We got connected through our lack of consciousness.
Yeah.
But things have changed a lot. The next kind of journey out of that, we went into entrepreneurship kind of together as well.
Yeah, and that was you started a franchise in our last year of university, and everyone was like, "Why is Brad like flying down to Vancouver every single weekend to like sell paint jobs or something?" But then I found out you made enough money to pay off your student loans in like one day. And then,
one day.
That's what you told me, at least. No. That's how you sold me.
In my first year, I paid off my student debt. I think it was 4 months. So it's not one day, but it's pretty.
Well, I don't mean you made the money in one day, but like you made enough money that year to just in one day just wipe out your student debts, I believe was what you told me.
Yeah, it was one payment. I was like,
oh, that's interesting. And then I felt that entrepreneurship would be a really good kind of growth opportunity for me, because I'd always been really shy and a bit socially awkward. And so I was like, how can I push my comfort zone the most? And followed you into that.
Yes, you did. And hopefully you're glad you did.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So entrepreneurship's where it's at. And I think that's what we can touch on a lot today, is I'm not just bringing on here because you're one of my best friends, but you've had a very dynamic and interesting journey, and you're the first person ever to introduce me to even personal development. And my original mentor, which was your mentor, which is 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏. First guy that I just like was stoked on and listened to all his audiobooks and all that good stuff. But you've kind of seen the landscape of just like, you've done the partying, you got that out of your system, you got into entrepreneurship and personal development, and you've traveled the world.
Yeah, my first ever backpacking trip was with you too.
Yeah, and then you proceeded to go on many more countries. But I think we should touch on just your journey, and I would love to learn, like, just touch on all the insights and things you've learned going through university all the way into like entrepreneurship, and then your experiences really diving deep into plant medicines. And I've mentioned it on other podcasts. If anyone's watched the other podcasts, Jared is the one who got me into plant medicines and my sitter for the first ones.
Hopefully you're glad that I did.
I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that you did.
You're the one person, like, I remember when I first came back from Peru and started working with psilocybin, it seemed like most of our friend circle was like worried about me because I was doing mushroom ceremonies in my bedroom. And you told me that everyone was worried about me, but you were the one person who was like, maybe there's something to this. Like, can you share this with me? And I think our first ceremony, we were like, you wanted to do mushrooms and like do a goal setting workshop. And we didn't end up setting any goals, but
no, I think I cried mostly.
Yeah. I had you do an exercise where you rated each area of your life.
That's
and
right.
when you got to spirituality, you were like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah. I gave myself like a 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how it started in your bedroom. And we just put your playlist. I remember Lana Del Rey. What was that song?
I think it would have been
Darkest
Day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wept because it was so beautiful and kind of dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes you on a journey.
Yeah. But yeah, kind of coming back to like those early years, we studied finance. I remember you wanted to go into corporate finance, and that actually,
investment banking.
Yeah, you wanted to go into investment banking. But you took off pretty quick in the entrepreneurial journey, and you kind of had a lot of success really quickly, and you were just like obsessed with personal development at the time. And then I would love to hear how that kind of evolved, and like what those early years of success, what was going on in your head, and like, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you mentioned, my entrepreneurial journey started. Well, actually, my entrepreneurial journey started a little bit before we did College Pro together.
Yeah.
I joined a network marketing company. And so that was like
ACN.
ACN, yeah.
That's right.
So that was my first entrepreneurial like foray of like my mind being open to the possibilities of like living like a life of freedom and unlimited income potential, and just being able to create literally whatever I wanted in my life. So it got me dreaming for the first time since I was a kid. Brought some really amazing mentors into my life, people who for the first time really ever were telling me like, yeah, you want to do that, go do that. Like, just, become an entrepreneur, take risks. You can have anything you want. And so that really helped kind of propel me along my path. I got really freedom driven. And so then when you introduced me to College Pro, the franchise company that we were part of, it just felt like a really good fit because it was promoted as an entrepreneurial development company.
Which it was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that was really for me. I wanted to learn how to run a business. I wanted to, as I mentioned, just like grow as a person, step outside of my shell, because I had spent most of my life just being really shy and insecure. And those first few years were, to answer your question, I was very committed to proving that I was good enough.
Right.
And so that was a big driver of mine, was recognition. I don't even know who I was proving, probably my dad on some level, or like all the people who didn't believe in me when I was younger. Yeah. But that was my big driver. I did quite well. I did break the record for the largest business in the province, at least, in the history of the company. Yeah. And I think that it was a bit of a unhealthy culture. It was really fun and there was good parts to it, but it was a bit unhealthy because by being the top performer, I feel like I got treated unrealistically, well, like I was put on a pedestal. And it was
literally, that's how that company worked.
yeah,
And
it was like
big award ceremonies and
yeah, it'd be at conferences and literally people were pretty much walking around looking at you as with your revenue number on top of your head kind of thing. Like
yeah,
if you grew a big business, you were given a ton of respect, and if you didn't, then you weren't. And so it was like a very unhealthy dynamic, and I feel like it really boosted my ego and my confidence in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
And so through that journey, I mean, I learned a lot. I did have a ton of fun. The drinking didn't stop at university. We kept partying through that period of our life as well. And, but I hit a point where that final year when like I did break that record, I had made and saved a bunch of money. I'd started investing in properties. At that point I had created a lot of freedom in my life as well. I was only working 15, 20 hours a week, and was traveling a lot. But so I basically created what I thought I wanted, what I had defined success as at that point in my life. And
do you remember what it was defined as back in those days?
I don't know if I actually like
it's vague.
I don't know, but like I knew I wanted to break that record. I knew I wanted to be the best. I knew I wanted to like financial freedom was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
But I had created a life that when I was in like the shy kid in high school would have only dreamed of having. And I built an amazing friend group, but I still felt like deep down that if I got rid of the money, if I got rid of the business, all that success, that I was still like the shy, scared little boy that I had been in high school.
Like if you just take off.
Yeah. When I started to actually when I was seriously deciding that I was going to leave college pro in that final third year a bit in business, because I just realized I wasn't passionate about painting, and that's not what I wanted to be spending my time doing. But when I started to realize I was going to be leaving, I really started to get this unsettling feeling of, okay, like who am I actually without this? Like I've built this huge ego structure around myself of like the top franchisee and the successful, I used to call myself like a young entrepreneur, and like that was my identity.
Right.
But like I knew deep down that I really hadn't actually grown much on the inside, like spiritually, emotionally. I was still super insecure. And so that really shook me. I call it my quarter life crisis, where I basically I made the decision to sell everything and essentially just go and travel indefinitely.
Yeah, that was bold.
Yeah.
I remember that. You were like, and then you were just like, I'm going to hit all these countries. And you came back with all these experiences.
Yeah. So that was a really incredible experience, because I literally, and I mean, one thing I did do was, because I had felt that a lot of my new confidence was built around money, I made the decision I wanted to rebuild myself from the inside out without money. And so I actually set an intention to spend all my money and to actually go at least $100,000 in to debt. That was my intention.
So you didn't even want to go to $0. You wanted to go negative.
Yeah.
Why?
So I feel it was that young, overly confident, I think it was a combination potentially of like this, I definitely bit off more than I could chew. And so, but at that time I was just, I think, overly cocky. A big part of it was, at least how I rationalized it, was money at that point was very easy for me to make. And when people would tell me, oh, like, I can't do what you're doing, or I can't just become a successful entrepreneur, I can't just create financial success for myself because of this reason or that reason or whatever. A lot of times it was because I don't have the money or whatever. In my mind, I was like, I want to set an example and inspire people and show people that you can literally create money no matter what your situation is. And so
you think at some level you want again, it's like, I'm going to show other people, I'm going to set this intention for other people to see what I can do.
Yeah. I mean, in hindsight, I think it was just self-sabotage. I think that on some level, I think it was a worthiness. I mean, I not to discount that completely. I think there was a part of that, but on a deeper level, I feel it was self-sabotage where that deep issue with self-worth that I'd struggled with my whole life just didn't feel I deserved to have what I had created. And so like, I just totally, I guess, let that leak away. Right. And not just back down to zero, but past that.
Did you actually get to negative 100?
Yeah.
Like in that trip?
Not in the trip, but following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and
impressive.
That's what one of my mentors, when I told him,
he
he
was
like,
$200,000 in like a year and a bit or something, or more, 300.
I don't know exactly how much, but yeah, definitely in the six figures. And that was the other thing I had been spending a lot of money on was personal development. And that I feel was very beneficial. I feel like I maybe got to a point, especially after I'd run out of money, where I kept investing in it, into courses and retreats and seminars that I...
So just financing it with debt. Yeah.
Yeah, financing it with debt. Just always trusting, I'm going to use this course to... the money I'm going to make from having this experience is going to have a positive ROI.
So you're looking at it like an investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it basically put me into a position where a very humbling situation where I think it was when I maybe got to about $70,000 in debt, where I started to really freak out, and it just became very difficult to get out. I got stuck there for years in this like cycle of worry and not feeling safe and just like feeling the weight of that debt. I feel like I wouldn't do it again, but I am also very grateful for the experience, because I feel like when I was young, I had literally no compassion, no humility when it came to understanding the struggles of people who are, especially in that area. I had compassion for people who struggled, because I had struggled in other areas of my life, but I never really appreciated when people would have excuses or would tell me about how hard it is for them, right, because of their debt, or because they're paycheck to paycheck, or because they're stuck in some dead end job. I would always just be like, you just have to change your thoughts. You just have to change the way you think and how you feel about things, and you'll attract that.
So how would you describe the energy of debt? Like, it is a big struggle for a lot of people. And like, even now, as like in our like global economies and on the government level, like we live in a debt world. Like, but on a personal level, how would you kind of best describe like what is the energy of debt, and how does that affect someone's psyche, and how did it affect yours, I guess?
So for me, the energy, it felt like this weight. It felt like a weight that was just always on my back, that I was always pulling along with me. And I would just continue to get more tired and tired, like spiritually, energetically, from carrying that weight, but the weight never got any lighter. And so eventually I actually hit a point where I was in probably one of the most difficult times in my life, where just it seemed like my energy was just so low and burdened and just like toxic, that just like seemed like everything in my life was just not going well.
Right.
And then it was a journey of just like slowly moving my way out of that. But
what does that journey look like? Where do you start?
So for me, the first thing I did was I hired a coach to support me. And I'm really very grateful, because at the time I didn't really feel like I could afford it. But
you're in huge debt.
Yeah, but I reached out to someone who had been a coach of mine in the past, and he actually offered to coach me for free for a period of time, and then slowly had me start to pay. But That really helped to have that support. But the biggest thing I would say was just starting with my daily commitments to myself. So a big part of my personal development journey was me going off to these amazing courses, retreats. And then I started working a lot with psychedelics and spending time in the Amazon or working with psilocybin back home. But I'd be relying on these big peak experiences.
Yeah.
And I found that when I was in a good space, like before the debt, that would really propel me forward. I feel like me investing into personal development really helped me. I think that's what allowed me to grow my business so rapidly early on. But I found that once I was in the debt and I had that constant worry, like that worry energy of like every single day not feeling safe, every single day not feeling secure, those peak experiences weren't enough. I would go and have a peak experience and reach higher states of consciousness, heal through things, get clear, get insights. But then I would just fall back into old patterns because like just that constant worry and my external reality was so harsh. So what I realized was what all my teachers had been telling me for years that I wasn't listening to was the importance of a daily practice. And so I think that just starting to commit, getting the little wins, starting to build that confidence back with myself.
Yeah.
And starting just one day at a time, heal through all the crap that I'd built up.
And all this healing that you like this stage of your life, this is after you've come back from traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was one of the teachers I've talked about on this podcast is Don Howard, who you introduced me to, not him, but like you introduced me to Spirit Quest. But before you got home and started that journey, you'd found Don Howard and ayahuasca. You had worked with ayahuasca quite extensively in Peru. Yeah. What were kind of some of those original awakenings, or just what was your original experiences with ayahuasca? And I don't even remember why you went there. You just like came back and you were like, oh my God. Yeah.
So, I mean, why I went, I think I was seeking something, because that was after our franchise experience and me realizing that didn't create happiness.
Yeah.
I was looking for something, and it was actually Satyan, who is now my main mentor and teacher, 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨𝗧, who at a different retreat that I was at, a different course that he was just coming in as like a guest teacher, he mentioned that he was doing a trip to Peru later that year, and that I didn't go on his retreat, but he mentioned that they were going to be doing ayahuasca, and he told us a little bit about it. And I was like, holy shit, that sounds like something I want to do or explore. I immediately had that. He
didn't tell you about Spirit Quest.
He didn't tell me about Spirit Quest. Okay. He gave me, he said the word ayahuasca, and I immediately had like probably one of the strongest callings I've ever felt, that like this is something I needed to explore.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 2 months later, I was in a different personal development course. I mean, I was doing a lot of retreats at that time. But I had just got out of what was called a solo, where I'd spent 48 hours by myself. I had a little tent and no food, a little bit of water, I think they gave us. And it was just basically like a vision quest solo, where we spent basically 48 hours just completely on our own. And coming out of that, I was walking out of the area with side by side with someone who later became a friend. And I was telling him that I was going to be moving to South America in a few months, and that I was exploring something called ayahuasca. And he shared with me that his brother had been to Spirit Quest many times, and that if I was going to do ayahuasca, that Spirit Quest is where I needed to go. And he told me a bit about it, and I went home and applied, and Don Howard invited me to come join him for some medicine work.
Wow.
But really I was looking to, I think self-love was my intention that first retreat. That's why I went and worked with the medicine, was to learn to, I don't know if that's what I felt it was. I think when I first went there, like when I filled the application, it was more like, I want to grow personally. I want to like face my demons. I want to just go through transformation. But as that retreat went on, the first one, it became more and more clear that what I was there for was to learn to just love and accept myself, which is something I'd struggled my whole life with, and something that I had tried to overcome by making money, and it hadn't worked.
Yeah. Yeah. My experience is similar. Like, I never really thought I had that problem. And it took plant medicines is the part that showed me that underneath all like my pursuits and my goals and my ambitions, there wasn't like an authentic, full self-acceptance and love. It's just interesting how it shows up so differently for everyone.
Yeah.
I still struggle with it today. The ability to like sit still and not get anxious, we talked about it at dinner, not get anxious without my goals and my ambitions, my action and qualities that I like about myself, but not putting those on a pedestal within my own experience of myself. Yeah. And clearly on our planet, that seems to be the big one.
Yeah.
Self-love.
Yeah. And I shared as well that for me, it's kind of the opposite. I always felt comfortable when I was just with me. Like I always felt comfortable being by myself, but I really struggled to love myself and accept myself in social situations. And I always felt very awkward and critical of myself because I was socially awkward and because I struggled socially, and I always wanted to be the popular kid in school, and I could never. I was always just this shy little kid, and so for me it was like just allowing myself to be seen for who I was, and not being so critical of myself, of every little thing if I wasn't perfect in the eyes of others.
So, I mean, plant medicines have revealed a lot for both of us, and I still work with plant medicines frequently today. But for you, how did, you and I in those early years, we put ourselves through some really difficult experiences and we took a lot of like high dosage often. How is kind of maybe tell me a little bit more just like about your journey with plant medicines and how it's evolved and like what it has looked like.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I mean, I'm very fortunate and grateful that my introduction to at least the intentional use of plant medicines was with Don Howard, who was an impeccable man and teacher and shaman, and just such an amazing example of like the type of healer that I want to be working with, and that I could eventually model off of. And so that was the beginning. That first retreat, I was there for 2 weeks, 4 ayahuasca ceremonies, 3 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨 ceremonies. I didn't even know what 𝗔𝗕𝗢 was when I signed up for that retreat, but ended up being probably I would say the medicine that resonates with me personally the most of anything I've ever worked with.
𝗔𝗕𝗢 is 𝗵𝗔𝗥 cactus, if anyone watching doesn't know what that is. Brother spirit to peyote.
Yeah, the grandfather spirit.
The grandfather spirit, yeah.
Yeah. So after that retreat, I ended up, when I was there, Don Howard was talking about how he was telling us about his sacred pilgrimages that he used to do twice a year, where basically he would take a group of people on a pilgrimage across Peru. So you'd essentially go to 4 different sacred spots where anywhere from a few hundred years ago to a few thousand years ago, the peoples of that region would work with 𝗔𝗕𝗎 or 𝗵𝗔𝗥𝗘𝗗 cactus in a ceremonial way. And so I was like, that sounds really cool. And it turns out that a few spots had opened up. And so pretty much, I think the day after I left the sanctuary, I was looking it up and putting in an application. And so I ended up continuing my travels. I think I went and spent some time in Ecuador and Colombia. I was living in Medellin for a while. And so I actually flew back down to Peru a few months later and went on that pilgrimage with Don Howard. And that was his last ever pilgrimage that he ever did. And so I was very grateful and very glad.
I don't think I'd even met him yet at that point.
No, you hadn't. It was about a year and a half later, I believe, that we went down together.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad I took that opportunity. And so yeah, from there though, I came home, and it turns out that one of my friends from College Pro as well had started working with psilocybin quite regularly and had been doing a lot of research, had been really figuring out a really, I mean, in my opinion, a very powerful way of working with the medicine.
Yeah.
And so he started to teach both of us, me first, and then I introduced it to you, that we could have, I mean, I wouldn't compare it to working with Don Howard, but could still have these powerful spiritual healing experiences from my own home. And so my journey with that, I mean, when I realized the potential that I could do that, I was planning at the time of just coming home for Christmas and then going to India and continuing my journey. But when I sat in ceremony with, I did a couple ceremonies with Alex.
Yeah.
He took me on we did 3.5 grams the first time, and I was like, oh my God, like I can still have these experiences from home. And he invited me to come back a couple of days later, and we did 6.5 grams. I had no idea what that meant. And yeah, I definitely
not a small dose.
Yeah. I left this reality for sure. And I was in a space where I don't know if I had a full ego death, but I was no longer here. And I basically had to come to terms, like actually come to terms with myself that I was never coming back into this reality. And I actually got to a place of acceptance. Like I could imagine myself way off in the distance. Like it seemed like so far away. I could somewhat remember like 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨 and this life, but it was so far away, and it felt like I was never coming back. And so, yeah, I basically came to terms that I was never going to see my family again. I was never going to see my friends again. I was never going to be Jared again. And I was just like, okay, what's next?
This is with Alex.
This is with Alex.
So he's gone at this point, but like, okay,
Yeah.
he's sitting in this. Is he on that dose?
We're both
with
on
you?
6.5 grams.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he could handle a little bit. He had still more of his wits about him. I was just gone. But coming out of that ceremony, it was profound. Like I felt like there was something that healed within me, that where even more than my time with ayahuasca, I just absolutely like fell in love with myself, where for the next probably 4 to 6 months, I just felt amazing. Like my energy was so high and positive. I just felt like there was nothing that could shake me. I just loved myself so much. I was at the point where I could like look people in the eye and they would just start crying. It was just like, what's going on here? And
what was going on? Just this level.
It was just like, I just had this, because sometimes like on psychedelics, I'll be in a space of just absolute self-love, but then it fades. Whereas this time it didn't. And it lasted for several months. And so I got to a point where now I wanted to share this. I thought this was this magic bullet that like, I just wanted to share this with everyone. And then I think a lot of people in my life noticed the differences in me. So everyone, even people who probably would have been opposed to mushrooms, everyone seemed to want to do mushrooms with me. So I started to get into this trend of doing mushrooms almost every second day, and like high doses of mushrooms. And I was doing them every time as well. I didn't think at the time that I could just maybe be a sitter and not participate. And so yeah, I was doing a lot of mushrooms for probably 3 or 4 months. And I had like lineups of people who like wanted to do it with me. And there was one point where I during that time where I did 6.5 grams by myself, and again,
without a sitter.
And I had started smoking a bit of weed at the time. I never have been a big weed smoker, but because I was hanging out with Alex and he would smoke, and like I was doing fine, like I was having a great ceremony, and then I decided to smoke marijuana, and I smoked quite a bit. While I was on 6.5 grams, and I just felt like the whole world just like suck in on me, and like the entire I guess, energy of my space around me just like shifted into this like dark, terrifying energy. And I basically I started to freak out a bit, but I told myself, okay, I know that this is going to end. I know this is all just in my mind. I know this is going to come to an end. And then I heard in the back of my head, I don't know if it was the mushrooms or what, but I heard in the back of my head, this voice, this trickster voice saying, yes, it's going to end, but we're going to make it feel like eternity. And then my whole world just started spinning, and I went into these intense loops. And I know that I shouldn't look at the time, but I found myself checking the time a few times where it would feel like I'd lived a lifetime and like 30 seconds had passed by. And I started to like just really, really freak out, like really going into some pretty terrifying loops. Really felt like I was losing my mind. There was, luckily I was able to call Alex and get a hold of him, and he came and like helped guide me out of it.
How did he do that? What did he do to help guide?
He basically had me put on, while I was on the phone with him, he just basically told me, okay, turn off all lights, turn off all stimulation, put on your headphones, put on the heartfelt playlist of like really beautiful music that we used. Yeah. And then just focus on my breath. And he said it might seem like forever to get through that first song, but by the time you get to your second, third song, you're going to start to come back. And that happened. He came over, spent some time with me, helped me kind of move through that.
You called me in a few times.
Yeah.
Different ceremonies, but.
So I think that was also just very humbling for me. That was because I think similar to the intention to go into debt, I think I just had this like invincibility attitude, that like ego that I'd built in these periods of my life where I just felt that I could handle anything.
Yeah.
And so that definitely taught me, I know I'd been told respect the medicine, but that like really shifted my relationship with plant medicine, where I never took it so loosely again. And it almost created a bit of trauma within me, where at that point forward, especially doing solo ceremonies, anytime I did anything over 3.5 grams, I would feel like an intense fear of going back to that place and like losing my mind. And it actually really affected my ability to really feel the magic of the mushrooms and to have the same level of transformation and healing that I had when I first started working with them. Potentially a part of that as well was just like overuse, using them as a crutch. Yeah. But yeah, it took me probably 3-4 years before I started to really rebuild my relationship with the mushrooms to a place where now I like feel that trust with them after that experience.
Hearing your experience, I remember back in those days, almost gave me like a bit of fear. I never had it quite the same as you, like that level of fear embedded in it. But once I started to realize that potentiality of that through some of your experiences, like it really did wake me up to it as well. More caution that it's not always just going to be like a direct path to the highest intent. Like sometimes the lessons come in such difficult ways.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I feel like what I needed when I was coming out of my early 20s was humility, like more than anything. Like I feel like that was something I was really missing, and I never actually really appreciated it or really valued. Like when I would think about, okay, what are the traits I want to develop? Humility wasn't one that would come to mind. It was like, I want to be more confident. I want to be better in sales. I want to be like more outgoing or whatever. But I feel like what I really needed was to be humbled. And so the plants, the debt, just life challenges that have been thrown at me have definitely supported me in that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the moment, it's hard to see it that way though.
Always. Always.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've humbled?
Definitely. I feel like I've definitely been humbled, and it wasn't easy to go on that journey and to go from a place of feeling like I was on top of the world to to like struggling for probably 5 years of like struggle, like pretty intense struggle. And so, but that's what I needed.
Yeah.
Otherwise that's not what the universe would have given me, I believe.
Yeah. And you touched on it like probably like 20 minutes ago or something, but really something that I see you exemplifying now is just like really taking all of this and moving it away from like these huge peak experiences, whether that's some expensive personal development event or 6-7 grams of mushrooms. It's like, I see you in the daily practice now. And like you said, your teachers, the greatest teachers all say, it's like, it's what you're doing, the disciplines in the daily. And that has brought you to that as a practice, as your core spiritual practice, your core wellness practice. And, you know, you and I did Accelerated Evolution together, which is one of 𝗓𝗔𝗥𝗘𝗗's core offerings. And these are maybe I'd love to hear your outlook on what these processes are, but I use them and you've continued to actually go into mastery with these processes. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about your experience with Accelerated Evolution, which is through Warrior Sage and 𝗓𝗔𝗥𝗘𝗗 teaching this.
Sure.
But he's become one of your, like you said, top mentors. What is it about 𝗓𝗔? What is it about his approach?
Sure. You asked me a few questions there.
I did ask you a few questions.
Well, I'll start with the 𝗓𝗔𝗥𝗘𝗗 one because you just asked me and that's an easy one to answer.
Yeah.
One thing that when I first met him, I almost felt like his teachings went over my head in a sense. Like when I was first doing personal development work and like I was still going to courses in order to like learn how to make more money.
Yeah.
But when I reconnected with him years later, what really attracted me to him was that he was the first person I'd really met as a teacher that really exemplified that balance of mastery of the metaphysical and mastery of the physical. Like extremely successful businessman, extremely successful transformational coach, entrepreneur, leader, doing incredible things in the physical world, also like incredible shape in a super passionate, inspiring relationship with his wife after 30 plus years, I believe.
Yeah.
But then also just like so spiritually tapped in. And so because at that point in my life, I had a lot of business mentors and I'd had quite a few spiritual mentors, teachers at the time, but he was the first person who I felt that I wanted to learn both from.
Yeah.
And more than just learning both from, I wanted to learn how I could embody both the way that he did, the way he does.
Yeah. And in comes Accelerated Evolution, the first tool.
Yes. Yeah. So regarding like daily discipline, I mentioned that was when you asked me, when we were talking about the debt, like that was the critical turning point to start moving in the right direction, was implementing daily discipline. And that's what, you're talking about, like, I used to rely on peak experiences. I still see the value in peak experiences for sure.
Me too. I
will still seek peak experiences when I'm called to them. Not as often now. I'm not like, I feel like I don't rely on them nearly as much. But what I realized was that the peak experience, like to get the most benefit from the peak experiences and just to like live my best life, that daily discipline, the daily practices is really it's become the most important thing to me more than anything. And so Accelerated Evolution, that's, I would say, the foundation of my daily practice. I do a lot more than that I would consider my practice, but the one thing that I typically never let falter is doing at least one AE process every day.
So maybe for anyone listening, tell me about the processes. What is it really? What are these processes all about?
Yeah, so
I'm trained in as well, but I'd love to hear your
sure, and feel free
to
share your thoughts too, because I feel like I have been developing mastery in the facilitation of it, but I don't often communicate to people intellectually what they actually are, but I'll do my best. So yeah, I mean, AE, of everything I've explored, I would say even plant medicine in some ways, accelerated evolution has been in my experience, the fastest, deepest and most permanent way to create lasting change. So it's a set of verbally guided, closed-eyed experiences, where essentially the goal is to remove charge from within us, and charge essentially like the stuck energy. So when throughout our whole life, as things happen to us, as we, as experiences in our life we make, or like decisions that we make about a situation, we make judgments on things, if something's good or bad, right or wrong. But essentially we're picking up charge within within ourself. And that becomes like stuck energy. Like Satyan will talk about how we all have a certain amount of units of attention available to us. And the more charge we have, the less units of attention we have available for creation.
Because they're just stuck on these charges.
They're stuck on charges, and that makes us reactive, because a certain event happens that triggers us because it relates to something in the past that we made a decision on, or some sort of traumatic event that we weren't able to process. And all of a sudden our attention goes there and we go into like reactive mode instead of having choice. Right. And so what accelerated evolution does is really quickly and effectively, and usually permanently, if you have a full experience, removes that charge. So that charge can show up as mental, emotional blocks or stucknesses, limiting beliefs, stuck identities, wide variety of different ways that shows up. In the end, they're all pretty much the same thing, just different labels we put on it. But
stuck identities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's like a bundle of charges all in one.
Yeah, a bundle of different beliefs and charges all in one. So like, I mean, identity essentially is the way that we define in accelerated evolution is identity is a point of view that has a goal. So I might have an identity as an entrepreneur. Right. And my goal is to, create income for myself and serve people, serve the people that I like, serve my ideal clients to the best of my ability. I have an identity as a fiance, and I want to be
and charge can be positive or negative.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So charge isn't just negative. Charge is also can be positive charge, but we also still work to clear that, because when we have excess charge, when we want something so badly and we have excess importance on it, that's oftentimes what actually pushes it away from us.
Interesting.
And so we want to remove the negative charge, but we also want to remove the positive charge so that we can be operating from a place of like take all of that energy back. Because even at positive charge, now we're not choosing where our consciousness is going, because
we have to do that.
Yeah. Or our thoughts are all on that, or if it's not working, we're getting all triggered. So we want to remove the charge on both sides so that we can be in equilibrium and just move forward from a place of grounded freedom and
choice. Actual choice.
Yeah.
Right. And I find it so interesting too, because when you have positive charge, you're not really free either. And it can be supported by like communities because it's a good charge or it's a positive charge. So then you kind of can look at that and be like, oh, well then that's okay. But you're still stuck in that thing, having no choice because you have to do it.
Yeah. And it's not about not setting goals or not desiring things. It's just making sure that you're not putting too much importance on it.
Would that be like an Olympic athlete? They like probably have a lot of positive charge. Maybe on like big goals. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of not putting so much importance, letting go of importance. And oftentimes that's when the things we actually want will come to us. Yeah. And so with the, what was I going to say? I was going to say something else about AE. Oh, one thing I was going to say is that we always work on that internal charge. And most of the time, the actual external challenges that we're dealing with around that tend to just naturally resolve themselves once you've dealt with that internal charge. So it's not that we're just making you feel better. We are, But by removing that charge or that block, usually the universe all of a sudden just conspires to change your outer reality for you. And so that's where I find, like, working with clients or working with myself, people will come to me being like, I have this business challenge. We work on the subjective charge around it. And typically it just becomes the easiest thing in the world to just overcome that challenge once that charge is gone.
And what are the mechanics of dissolving the charge?
So essentially, charge is made up of 4 core elements if we break things down to like the 4, like as far as we can. And those elements are emotions, thoughts, body sensations, and images. So by fully duplicating or fully replicating or feeling each of those 4 elements that are attached to that charge, and there's different ways that we do that in like an intentional, systematic way. If done correctly, that charge will fall away and dissolve.
Right.
Yeah.
So you duplicate an experience, and then through that duplication, it changes.
Yes.
It dissolves the charge.
Yeah. And making sure that all 4 of those elements, because there's different modalities that maybe touch on 1 or 2 of those, like the thoughts, images, body sensations, and emotions. Whereas,
not all the processes touch on all of them.
Well, in AE they do, but there's different modalities out there that people might use for healing or this kind of work that might touch on 1 or 2. But what makes AE so effective is the fact that one of the things is that it is dissolving all 4 of the core elements of charge. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's been really
So
powerful.
you do one
for
a
me.
day.
Yeah. At least 1 a day. I mean, sometimes 3, 4, 5. I've become pretty fast at them.
Yeah.
But that's a big part of my process, is just if there's something urgent like that I'm dealing with that's causing disharmony, I'll work on that. Otherwise, I'll just be thinking longer term at like, okay, what do I want? Because there's also processes to that allow you to awaken traits within yourself, or to for more around goal achievement, or perhaps there's an area of my life that isn't exactly how I want it to be, and I'll even if it's not like even if it's not like super painful right now, I'll be proactive and start working on those kind of things as well.
So it's been a long journey to get to where you are today, and one of the best parts about what you do, and I see you doing, is that the processes that you use on yourself and truly believe in are kind of the core of your offering today. And yeah, AE is what you use to move people through obstacles, challenges, disharmonies, which in the business world, often the problems we have are just in our minds, preventing us from taking the actions we know we need to take. And then surrounding your entire coaching and business coaching system around the internal work, which is what I love about what you do. Tell me a little bit about, just your core offerings today and what that looks like for someone, and your approach to business coaching and internal work now. Because this is the integration, spiritual and integration with business integration, which has been, for me, a difficult one. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your whole offering today.
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, the accelerated evolution modality, which probably, I mean, I don't want to say more than plant medicines, but it's definitely been like one of, if not the most profound modalities I've come across for myself.
And you can do it daily.
And the fact that I can do it daily too, it can be part of my daily practice. Doing 5 grams of mushrooms, probably not sustainable. And it also doesn't take 6-7 hours out of my evening.
No.
Doing it this way. So, so with that, like the fact that it was so powerful for me, it made sense for me to, I became certified as a coach in this year, like several years ago as well. And so it just made sense when I hit a certain point in my career where I decided that instead of just building my own businesses in whatever nature that may be, I wanted to build a company that was helping other people grow their own businesses, and not just grow their own small businesses, but also create the lives that they had always dreamed of, and create that freedom they got into business for that perhaps they have been struggling to actually achieve. And so, so it just made sense to blend my business experience, and especially my background in College Pro, in a franchise, like actually learning the foundations of how do you build a company the right way and put the right systems in place, with my startup experience, and then blending it with accelerated evolution. And as you mentioned, most of the time, the biggest challenges that the entrepreneurs I meet, at least, are going through, the root issue, at least, is an internal one. It's a mindset, emotion, either a mental, emotional, or like psycho-spiritual challenge that is causing the actual symptoms that might show up as inconsistent leads, or like staff continuing to turn over, or like profitability issues, or whatever it is. And so when I first started on this journey, I didn't actually know how I was going to blend the two. I just knew that I had this powerful, incredible modality as a transformational coach, and I had a background as a business coach and entrepreneur. And I knew that there was a way to blend these in a very potent way. And so I just went out and started coaching people and figured things out as I went. And over that first year, things just started to fall into place, where I just found the right balance of the two and started to attract just the right clients for my work, the people who are really drawn to it. And I've been able to create some really, really incredible results. And so the one thing with Accelerated Evolution is, and the thing that I love about it, and I think what makes it so, like the potential of it so large, is the fact that we're actually taking people's problems, and everybody in the world has problems. Most people want to talk about their problems. And so we're actually, we're taking people's problems and using their problem, their challenge, as a gateway to actually take them to higher states of consciousness. And so, and in doing that, dissolving the charge and healing.
Yeah.
But essentially we're raising consciousness through people's problems. And so I feel there's so much potential there, because this is a modality that can be brought into the corporate world. It's not something that is say as taboo as plant medicines.
Well, even the language with Accelerated Evolution, like words like charge, or like there's just not as much charge.
Stuckness.
Yeah,
blocks.
Stuckness, blocks, like those
limiting beliefs even are pretty accepted. Like,
yeah, so you're using more appropriate language to appeal to a much larger audience, which can be just people in the regular business world who might be like, oh, I'm not spiritual. But it's like, do you want more peace in your life, is a nicer way than saying, do you want to be enlightened?
Yeah.
Right? Enlightenment, it's like, well, no, that's spiritual. It's like, you want more peace? Oh, yeah, I want more peace.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and we do have a process, as you know, that can take people to very quickly to a temporary state of enlightenment. Kensho.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't go around telling people. That's not what I lead with.
No. I mean, you could if you know who you're talking to.
Yeah, exactly.
But so it's really cool seeing you kind of come all the way around and being able to integrate all these things. And I know that me, along with many people, the integration of spirituality and business has been a difficult one. And it's such a weird thing. I don't know what has made it so difficult, but I know when I kind of started to realize life was a spiritual experience, I started to reject almost the material world as if it wasn't part of creation. And that took me years to cycle through that on my side of things. And same with me. In my offerings, I use Accelerated Evolution for my coaching. And yeah, you don't even have to tell anyone about it. It's just like, hey, I'd like to take you through an exercise.
Yeah.
Or, a process. But even in the word process could be
an experience sometimes.
Yeah, I'd like to take you through an experience.
A lot of times I'll just, if I'm working with someone new, I'll just say, or like if I'm not working with someone yet, I'll just ask them, are you open to a powerful coaching experience?
Yeah.
Take them through it. And oftentimes people are able to overcome something they've struggled with their entire life in one session.
That's the power of it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then you can, once you have that new perspective, then you can actually set a goal and like really look at what you want to do once you've dissolved that charge.
Yeah. One thing we always talk about in the community is that it's very difficult to coach on top of charge. And so that's the thing, is like the coaching I used to do before AE, because I've been a business coach for quite a while, is I would be coaching you but there would still be all that mental, emotional stuff underneath. Right. Whereas once that charge is gone, it's just so much easier to work with someone. And oftentimes they will just their own wisdom rises to the surface and they know what to do.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because you know, if you go all the way back to those early years in College Pro and in the early entrepreneurship communities, you can coach on top of charge for years and years and years, and someone can actually get success and all these things. But once it all comes to an end, if you still haven't dealt with the underlying thing, like it took for you, it was years and years before you eventually self-sabotaged all the way back to the root.
Self-sabotage past where I started, at least financially. I don't know if I went all the way back to,
but you eventually had to come back to deal with the underlying root.
I had to come back and deal with the actual issue.
Yeah.
And that became a big theme of that year of my life, was like turning my focus inward. Stop searching outside of myself for what I desired. Don't for the love, the connection, the peace, and look inside me. And that's the only place I've ever, so far at least, found that works, is looking this way. I haven't found anything out there yet that does it.
Yeah.
At least not long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And same here. It's so much now just looking at the underlying, we were talking as well at dinner, but right now I'm going through a period of just trying to cut back on all my goals and sit with myself again. And there's these feelings of, it's not nearly like it used to be back in the day, where I would never even indulge the thought of discontinuing action and getting things done. But now just being able to step back, slow life down, and just sit with myself and actually enjoy the process and be at peace was not actually available to me for a long time, because there was so much positive charge on getting things done.
Yeah.
So it kept me in that loop of you have to do it. And then the community around me is you got encouraging me. But never really being able to sit, look underneath all of that and say, hey, it's okay. You have permission to slow down, which is now finally coming into a place after a lot of years where I know I'm giving myself permission to slow life down when I need to. Yeah. So thank you to Accelerated Evolution for the processes, right?
Yeah. We took that, we got certified together as well. That was another part of our journey.
Yes, we did get certified together. And then now you're in Master Coach, and you're building your business. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, or if you're in resonance with someone watching this right now and they wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to do that? Because I can put links in the below tab or whatever. Yeah.
Well, first, maybe I'll just clarify who I work with.
Totally.
But anyone feel free to reach out looking for support. But specifically, I typically work with either small business owners who have at least kind of have proof of concept with their business, who are looking for support in scaling, typically scaling from in the 6 figures to the 7 figures and beyond.
So you're kind of at least doing $100,000 and beyond.
Minimum. Typically at least. I have worked with some people a bit earlier on, but typically at least couple $100,000 and looking to scale. So that's and obviously someone who is willing and wanting to do the inner work and actually does want to work on themselves and understands that.
Who doesn't want to do the inner work?
So
come on.
Some people, So that typically small business owners looking to scale their business in the path, following a path of least resistance. I often say kind of shifting from the mule, that workhorse mule, to a magician, where you start to actually build your company by snapping, more like a magician, snapping your fingers and making things happen in the path of least resistance rather than the struggle. And then the other type of client that I would work with is executive to, CEO of a larger company who already knows how to scale and grow companies, but is struggling with burnout, with balance, with having the rest of the areas of their life, whether that's their health, their relationships, their spiritual connection, suffering, and they're just putting all their focus into their business. So those would be the two people that I would typically be able to help. And so if that does fit you and you're interested in learning more, you can go to my website, www.entrepreneurawaken.com. So I'll put the links. Sure. Yeah. That would be the best way to get in touch.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, I think that's thanks for sharing everything.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
You've had a heck of a journey.
Yeah.
And the journey goes on.
Yeah, I don't share my journey very often, so
we didn't even get to talk about Burning Man and all these other things. But maybe for another podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. And you want a hug?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.